Goedemiddag kijkers, good afternoon viewers. Welcome to the fourth Tech Talk of this year from our Tech for Impact campaign. We are joined today by Dr. Mathijs de Weerdt and Dr. Gemán Morales. They're both from the Faculty of Electrical Engineering, Mathematics and Computer Science and are both founders of Tulipa. I hope I pronounced it right. We'll come back to you in a second, but first of all I want to explain to the viewers today again why it's important we have this Tech Talk and why it's important we have a Tech for Impact campaign. This question is asked to me regularly, and people ask me, why is it important to invest or fund research? Because in Holland, we live in Holland and we pay tax, and this is being paid by the government. Unfortunately, that's only partly true, and it's less and less true has been becoming less and less true in the past years, where we have been faced with budget cuts and also an increasing amount of skepticism against science. So it's important for those that believe in science and research and believe that there's no innovation without science and research, and without innovation there is no sustainable economic growth, that research keeps being funded. And the thing is with research, of course, a lot has been funded already, but the interesting stuff, the stuff that brings innovative ideas from idea to the market, to the real world, this is something that it's always difficult to find funding for. And you both probably know this, and this is where the university fund has been stepped in for the past 100 years. And this is why we think it's important that people will donate to projects like yours. It is like, you could name it a scientific incubator where science is brought to the real world. So if you believe this, please give a donation. And also, it's not only because it will help projects like yours, but it will also give a strong message that you think funding research is important. And if you've been watching the show regularly, you might think, well, I've been watching this a couple times and I still haven't done a donation. Please let us know what we should do to make you donate. And you can send us in the notes. You can ask questions later on, but you can also give me a tip how we can improve on this, because I think it's really important that we raise funds for research like yours. And let's talk about this. Mathijs, Gemán, welcome. Just to immediately jump to the important part, why is it important that your project is being funded?
We have a project together that helps making the important decisions regarding the energy transition. And there are clear fundamental challenges that we are addressing here to be able to have, in the end, a tool that can support decision makers here, like in the end the government, but also energy companies, to get us to the future energy system that is more sustainable than the current one, and do that in a cost-efficient way. So that is a nice combination that we like, because there is a clear use case, it's clear where that is a valuable contribution for society, and there are very interesting mathematical optimization and algorithmic challenges.
Great. So this is a good example of science that can help the real world. And Gemán, you're from Colombia. What brought you to Delft?
I live in the Netherlands. Actually, one of the main reasons is my wife, that is Dutch. But then I also found a good place in TU Delft, because there we can bring this, we can research these problems. And I also work at TNO, and there with the fundamental research we do in TU Delft, we can apply it to real life in TNO. And why TU Delft? Yeah, it's very well known, at least for me as an outsider, it's very well known worldwide. So this is a good place to be in the front of the research line.
Yeah. And where does your passion for algorithms come from?
Oof, I will show a little bit of that in the presentation, but first is I like the challenge of these problems, even since I was a tiny kid, just to do math problems, that was very interesting. And now to realize that they have an impact in real world, that became even more interesting. It is not just for me, but it also feels nice to give a contribution to society, that those solutions can help the society.
Yeah, that's something I would get passionate about. And for you, Mathijs, you did your master's in Utrecht with your PhD here in Delft. What brought you to Delft?
So initially the PhD.
Yeah.
It was a very attractive project because I did my master's just by myself, working with robots in a lab. It was nice, the theoretical component was challenging, but it was just me, and here I could join a project with other PhD students with also nice application in mobility and a challenge in coordinating plans of smart agents. So that brought me here initially, and then I found out what I thought was a significant difference between Utrecht University and Delft is that here it's really appreciated if you do take that extra step and bring your ideas close to society.
Yeah.
And I like that. It's an extra motivation, as Gemán just said. So a double win.
Yeah, absolutely a double win, and a crucial double win, because again, if the fantastic ideas that we all have here aren't brought to society, they remain ideas, and they don't become solutions. Anyway, and your passion is your passion also in the mathematical algorithm side, or is it also about the energy transition?
The core of my passion is in the design of algorithms, and I found out that bringing this to some concrete use case, useful case, is quite challenging. You need to understand what's there, and so I found out the hard way that doing too many of the different use cases, and there are many different use cases for algorithms, but doing too many is less valuable, is less impactful. Yeah. So I've decided that doing this related to the energy transition, that is something that I feel is very important, that I like, and that I now also understand way better than 10, 15 years ago. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I hope so. A lot has happened in 15 years. And for you, Gemán, is what's your link with the energy transition, or is it just you're in it for the algorithms and the fact that you're doing a fantastic job with the energy transition is
yeah. This is actually funny, a little complementary to what Mathijs said. Yeah. I am the other way around. I am more energy transition person, and then the mathematical part. So I am an electrical engineer by background. At the beginning, I was just into electrons and physics and all that stuff. But then I realized that those problems are so complicated that you need a lot of math behind. And then the math became for me, okay, I really like math before, but that complement made it even more attractive. But yeah, I am more energy transition and then math.
A very good combination then of the two of you. And I presume you met here in Delft. And how did you come up with the idea of Tulipa? Tulipa.
Oof, maybe I can mention a little bit about that. That was, I think, around 2019. I was working at TNO, and there was an opening for proposals, an opening from NWO. And then we needed to apply from the side of the university, but in collaboration with TO2 institutes like TNO. And I did a postdoc here at TU Delft before.
Yeah.
That is when I met Mathijs.
Yeah.
But I remember we met again in that place, and he wanted to the algorithmic side. So there you see the combination again. He was, okay, let's apply these algorithms to something relevant.
Yeah.
And I was from the TNO side, from the applied side, said, okay, I have a relevant issue that we are facing in TNO, so let's look for these algorithmic solutions.
Yeah.
And then we build this proposal together, and that is how it started.
Ah, okay. Yeah, nice.
And we got funded, and that is how it started.
Yeah. Funding always
Yes.
is very important in science.
Yeah, without the funding, we couldn't have started.
Yeah, and in this specific project, the funding from the university fund, how will that help you in your specific research?
Maybe you can.
What we are building, what we have built so far, are large-scale implementation where we can support the decisions, but you need deep technical understanding to be able to use it. For example, it's implemented in Julia, a specific programming language that's very well suited for these type of mathematical optimization problems. It is with large data sets, and if you want to study a new use case, you need to go through several steps to be able to produce useful results. Currently, we are training people who want to do that, but they're mostly other PhD candidates, people from TNO who have we get questions from clients like Planbureau voor de Leefomgeving, for example. Yeah. But it stays within a small circle of potential users currently.
Yeah.
What we would like is that it becomes a little bit easier for a broader set of people, like journalists, people from different media who can then verify maybe some of the results, and also maybe some politicians who really specialize in a topic like the energy transition, that they can at least understand where the outcomes come from and analyze some of the results, maybe small variations of the study that has been done. And for that, we would like to have a more accessible user interface.
Yes.
So currently, it's programming language, and if you are, you can build some plots. Yeah. But to make that much more accessible, so that is what we'd like to use this for, to really enlarge the impact of what we've done so far.
I can understand, because it's if politicians and journalists and and the people that make decisions don't understand what you are doing, then again, it's hardly ever become a real solution if it's not being used. Well, it makes me really curious to your presentation. I think you start, Gemán. If you take the floor, then I like to tell the viewers that this is all being recorded, and if you do have questions, you can ask them in the application, and also, again, if you have tips for me how to improve on our fundraising, let us know. And please, welcome to Gemán. Take it off.
Thank you. So this is a presentation. There are two parts. I will give an introduction and a background of where our research is. Mathijs will show one of the specific examples of where we are like going beyond the state of the art, but there are many other fronts. We will be very happy to talk about them, but for now we keep it like that. So this presentation is about the Tulipa energy model, and before starting, I want to show a little bit of the history, how we arrived to this point, and also the story, how my passion to these problems, as you asked before, the relationship between the energy transition and the math. Then I want to go a little bit back to 2011. That was like my first year as a PhD, first and a half, and I got invited by system operators in USA to present some of the findings I had during the PhD about how to better solve the short-term markets. So the system operators are like the similar They are similar to Tenet, the Tenet of the Netherlands, but in the US, they also solve the market. So that means that they receive the bids from the generation and the demand, and they need to find the optimal solution to find the prices and the dispatch of all the units, the generation and demand, at the minimum cost. And those are huge problems that you want to take into account all the constraints of the generators and also the network constraints, for example, to respect the physics and to obtain a feasible solution. So that event was organized by the regulator there because savings of 0.1%, that is savings in millions. Then, yeah, whatever you can bring there, that could save a lot of money to final users. And then by then, I found a detail that they were not including in the markets. And one of the details that the detail I found was that usually the generators were allowed to bid, or they're producing zero, or they're producing between a minimum output and a maximum, where they are controllable. So what I found out is that there are some trajectories in between, and that has an impact in the final result that can be around 2 to 5% savings. So when I presented all that to them, to the system operators, I was very enthusiastic because I was thinking, okay, you are looking for savings of 0.1%, so here is something that can save way more than that. And I remember one system operator looked at me and he told me, this is not news to us. We know that. And you know why we don't include those details? Because we cannot solve them. We need to solve the market, this market clearing problem, we need to solve it within an hour. And if we include those details, that can take more than a day. So I was shocked. First, in all my literature review, I didn't see that those details were included at all. I didn't know that they were aware of that, but apparently in practice they were aware. But I also realized in that point that if you don't develop those algorithms, those mathematical models that can be solvable in the limited time that you have, you cannot bring the solutions to practice. Then, I continued my PhD. I started focusing in that part. Actually, like 5 years later, I realized that they included those details using the publications I produced solving that problem. So that is good. And then around 2018, where I started working with TNO, I saw that they were solving similar problems, not operation anymore, not the day-ahead market that is just solving one day, but other larger models with multiple years. And then I also realized that they were ignoring many critical details. And for me, by then, when I realized about that, I was like, whoa, why do you ignore those details? Because that can lead to not so reliable solutions. And then I got the same answer. We cannot solve these problems. We need to solve these problems within a day. And if we include all those ideal details, maybe it take weeks or we cannot even solve them. Then again, I realized that, okay, we need to work in these models so that we can include those crucial details and obtain more reliable solutions. So just to give a little of introduction of these energy system models that we're talking about Tulipa, is we use these models to try to obtain the energy transition pathways to the future. So those are mainly investment problems. So what is the investment we need? Large-scale storage, where do we need it? When do we need it? And then we want to include the constraints of the network, for example, to take into account congestion. We want to, the Netherlands is not an island, so we need to include the surrounding countries. So this is basically a European model. There is a lot of interaction more and more with other sectors like hydrogen and heat. Then we need to include the sector coupling to obtain those investment decisions. What is the path at minimum societal cost that take us to this ideal future we want to see? And to obtain those investment decisions, then we also need to model the operational problems. Then we are talking that, we want to capture the variability of the renewables. We are talking at least in the electricity part, we need to model this with at least hourly resolution. So then you can already get an idea that we are talking about hourly resolution, multiple decades to model, and at European level, this becomes a huge, complicated problem to solve. Then I want to show here what is the challenge And here I want to show there is basically a Pareto front, that is, we have a trade-off between the model details and the time to solve. Of course, the more details we include, the more time it takes to solve. And the Pareto front is basically the border between all the models that you could solve, but could take too long, and the part that you cannot solve. So of course we want to include all the details and solve them instantaneously, but that is not possible. So there is a border where what is feasible or possible to solve. Then the usual way is that, okay, we define our level of detail. This is the detail we want to include in the models, and we would like to solve it. And usually what we find is there is a computational limit. And so far, in this type of models, the common solution is, okay, what can we do to solve this problem? Let's get the most powerful computer we can. Let's use the composition techniques. Let's use the best solver we can. And that helps, but still, the problems that we want to solve are so ambitious that we cannot solve them. So the usual solution is, yeah, then we have to simplify the problem so we can solve it. That is basically what others are doing, and what many also sometimes ask. That is the only option we have. Then that is one of the first disadvantages of the traditional models, that there is a fixed level of detail. So you need to choose what level of detail you want to model. And here is where we start with the innovations of Tulipa. The first one is that we develop a model and then a new mathematical formulation in a way that we don't have a fixed level of detail. So in our case that we are modeling the Netherlands, for example, the energy transition in the Netherlands, we want hourly resolution for the Netherlands to take into account the renewables and the flexibility. And it has to be in a European context. We are not an island, but we don't need to model Portugal in hourly resolution. Then we develop a model that allows us to do that we can have different levels of detail at the same time in the model. Then we can borrow some computational resources that we save from some simplification somewhere else, and we can put more key details in the area of focus. And we do that in the temporal dimension, in the geographical dimension, and in the technological dimension. And we don't stop there. So here is where we start being more hardcore with the math. Basically, we're talking about optimization models, mainly linear programming and mixed integer programming models. So there are reformulations that you can do in a way that in linear programming, that you can obtain smaller problems without sacrificing any details. So usually people ignore that, thinking that in linear programming there is nothing to do. It's a real linear program. And in optimization, that is almost the simplest you can go. And in mixed integer programming, we also develop formulations that are higher quality. They are called tighter formulations. So we develop those tighter formulations, and also we pay attention that they don't grow in size, in a way that at the end we can solve the same problems, but faster. Another strategy that we use is that we create approximations in a way that we sacrifice 5% of the accuracy, but we get 95% of computational resources back. So with a tiny bit of extra computational resources, we can almost get to the accuracy we want. And that is one of the cases that Mathijs will show. And the other thing that we do, the other research part, is we also try to develop models that have more details and they don't increase the computational burden. Just to give an example, at least in linear programming, so again, people think that there is nothing to do or not that much to do in a linear program because it's like the simplest you can go. But using some theory of mixed integer programming, we can create better relaxations of the linear problem in a way that produce solutions that are more similar to the original integer problem. So basically, we can produce better linear programming approximations. So that is a way that we can include more details in a reformulation of the problem without increasing the solving times. So at the end, what we do is we move this border of what we think is possible. And that is the research we are doing here in the algorithmic groups in TU Delft. And all this research, we are bringing it to Tulipa. And I also wanted to mention that Tulipa is a model that is developed in collaboration with others, with TNO, with eScience, and Utrecht University. So now the turn is for Mathijs to give one of the examples of the specific things we do to lower computational issues.
Thank you. Thank you, Gemán. What I now like to do is to explain to you one of the algorithmic contributions that we have found out and that is implemented in Tulipa. And it's, Gemán mentioned it already, it's one that approximates the solution a little bit. So we give a little bit of the accuracy, of the exactness, we give it away, but it reduces significantly in the computation time. Here we see a visualization of the network of Europe, where every country is represented by one node. This can be represented in our model. We can also represent the whole energy system at different scales. And at every of these nodes, we have this investment decision to make. So there is already some installed capacity. So at some places, there is maybe even a coal-fired power plant. There's some wind installed. And we can identify the potential investment decisions that are allowed and that are more or less desirable. But we don't know what is then the most cost-efficient way to do that, such that at all moments in time, the demand in electricity can be met. Here we see so-called demand profiles. So for every node in this network, we have an expected number of hours. For every hour of every day, we have an expected demand of energy, electrical energy, that is required by those nodes. Actually, on this plot, it's just a selection of days. It's just the first days of every month. The whole data set contains this for all the days and all the nodes. So that is the demand that needs to be met. It needs to be met with either the currently installed capacity or future investments. And this includes, of course, renewables. So we have some predictions of what renewables can do. What the expected renewable generation is of solar on certain days. Same for wind at sea, wind at land. And of course, if you increase the installed capacity, also the production will increase. So that is the input to our problem. And then the question is, where shall we install what extra capacity to make sure that at all times we have this energy balance? At every hour, the production from all these generators can meet the demand. This is modeled as an optimization problem. Gemán already told you. So what the aim here is to minimize costs. So these are is a combination of the cost for making these extra investments and the cost for operation. Such an optimization problem also has constraints, and these constraints describe the conditions that must be met for such a solution. The energy balance constraints and also operational constraints. For example, a gas-fired power plant can ramp up quite quickly, but there is a limit to it. And a nuclear power plant is much more is reacting much more slowly, can react much more slowly. And then the decisions here are the investment decisions, but we also, as part of solving this problem, we actually need to make decisions for every hour of every day of every generator what to do, to be able to determine if that is indeed sufficient. So that's a really big problem, and therefore we need to find solutions to do that more efficiently. Here is a visualization of a solution, actually only of the operational decisions. So what you see here on the x-axis are the time periods, let's say an hour. And for every hour, then it is the outcome of the optimization is a decision to which of the generators is used and for how much energy that generator should produce in that hour. And this is a period of about a week. Okay, but how to do that more efficiently? Well, the core idea, for this core idea, we base ourselves on the literature. And in the literature, it had already been identified that actually, although we need to make these decisions for investments with an impact for several decades, and we need to reason about these hourly balances, because renewables like sun, it's not there the whole day, so it's really important that we have a per hour, or maybe even with more detail, we need to be able to reason about those decisions. But in all these decades, there are many days that are actually quite similar. A winter day in 2026 may be very similar to one in 2028. So we don't need all those periods. So that was already established by the literature. But together with Greg Neustrov, a postdoc in our joint project, we found a smarter way to do this. It's actually a combination of two ideas. One is, instead of just representing periods by a subset of those periods, we can represent them by a weighted combination of the subset. And this we call blending, where we use weights of this subset. So the subset is the representative period. So the periods that we choose to use, we call them representative periods, and we need to represent all the periods by that subset. The second part of the idea is that we then need to choose more smartly which periods to include in these representative periods. So I'll explain each of these a bit better. On the left-hand side, there is a mapping that is traditionally done in the literature. When we have a smaller set of representative periods, so these are the columns here in this table, we can use them to represent a much longer list, the rows here, of periods. And the one in this table indicates that that period of that row is represented by that period of that column where the one is. If these periods were, you can think of a period as a day. If these days had information in 2 dimensions, it would look like the plot on the right-hand side. So the representative periods are then the big orange balls, and all the days that are similar, so close in that space, will be mapped to those smaller subset of representative periods. In fact, this is very high dimensional, because for a single hour on a single day, we have already all these data points for all the nodes for both the demand and the renewable generation. So it's a high dimensional space, but the idea stays the same. So this was known already. What we contributed here is the idea of blending these. So instead of just having a 0 or 1 in the table, we allow arbitrary numbers. And those numbers indicate the weight of those representative periods to contribute to, in the end, the decisions for the periods in the original problem. And that can be visualized in 2 dimensions, as we see here on the right. Here we see that with the same 3 representative periods as before, we can now represent all the blue points within the orange cone exactly, so that we don't have an error there. We still do have some error of the blue points, or the periods that are outside this cone. We cannot make a combination other than just taking a single point to improve the representation of those blue points outside the cone. But here comes the other part of the idea, and that is we should choose these representative points differently. We should choose them from the whole of all the points. So you could say we should choose outliers, because by combining outliers you can represent all the others. And that is represented here. in this visualization. That by selecting 3 different ones and including the origin, so a day with no demand and no generation, we can then represent the dataset much better. So let's now see what the consequences of this combination of ideas. So on the top left here, you see again the solutions of the operational decisions of a week. And on the top right, you see how that looks like if you came to these conclusions by using only 30 representative periods. As you can see, that is, it is an approximation of what we see on the left, but a rough one. And so the current state of the art is that we base the decisions for investment on approximations like these. By blending representative periods, and especially by using periods from the whole, in that combination we can get a better approximation, as you can see here at the bottom. Well, okay, this is not an exact science, so we also measure the difference. We measure the impact that this approximation, it is an approximation, that it has on the solution quality. So the measure that we use here is what we call the regret. So we compare the outcome that we get with this approximate model to the optimal solution. And then in this approximate model, we may violate some demand and we get an extra penalty. So the approximate model has worse solutions. In fact, with some of the traditional methods, if you just use 10 representative periods, you do get a solution, but the costs are twice as much as the original one, which is represented here by the 100%. 100% regret means twice as bad solution. Already, with such a small number of representative periods in this experiment, our method achieves just above 10% of extra cost. And for both methods, the more representative periods you add, the better this approximation gets, until it gets really close to just 1 or 2% loss. So this is one example of the technology that has now been put in Tulipa. And we really hope that this will help making better decisions regarding the energy transition. And we also think it's very important because these decisions, they involve billions of euros. So it's good for us if this is done as smartly as possible.
Thank you, Mathijs and Gemán. It was nice to have a duo presentation, also from the practical side and the theoretical side. Look, of course, we get a lot of questions, and I already expected this. A lot of questions regard the policy makers and the policy, because as you said, it's important that your techniques are, and you get a better interface so that the policymakers understand what you're doing and make use it to come up with better investments. And we have a question from Jessica, and also it's almost the same question as Roald Arkestein asked. How could this facilitate a wider energy planning field, not just system operators, but also regional energy strategies and local policymakers? So how can this planning, how can this facilitate the? Of course, you told some of it in the presentation, but which?
Yeah, no, I can try to give at least the first part of the answer. Because indeed, so the example that I showed was for the whole of Europe, and also a simplified model with this one node per country. So the decision that comes out of that is, or might come out of that is, we need more wind energy in the Netherlands.
Yes.
But it doesn't say where, or it does say how much. But if you want to decide how to invest in a local community and make sure that for that local community that maybe has a limited connection to the main grid, then that means you cannot just rely on the outside world for all your generated energy. You need to produce some yourself, and that can also be that's a question that can also be answered by Tulipa. But what is needed is a lot of data. So you need data about the network and the capacity limitations on the connections. You need, like in the example of Europe, predictions of the demand for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And you need some predictions of the renewable generation that would be the result of the installed capacity. But given that, then you can say, okay, for the different nodes in your local network, these are my options. So here I can maybe install a battery, here I can maybe put a wind turbine, and here maybe a solar park. But what is now the best?
Yeah.
And that we can compute.
And then you know in what to invest in that local community.
It gives the most cost-efficient investment given the information that we put in. And then, of course, there may, that is, I think, one important ingredient in discussions to make the final decisions of what to do there.
A question connected to this, and maybe you can also answer that. It's a question of Koen. Do you take in your models into account policy changes and economical change? Because I can imagine that and there's also we have also received questions about nuclear energy, and now you probably don't take it into account because it's hardly there except in France, but maybe it will be there. So do you take this into account? Can you model that in?
Yes. So basically, the way how that is done now is that we try to optimize the minimum cost, but you can check with different scenarios what happens if you don't allow nuclear energy, and you will get another system. Could be more expensive, but based on the options that you give, then you can obtain those two or more different solutions. What if you allow for nuclear energy, and what if you don't? That helps to inform the policymakers.
So your model can also be used to promote nuclear energy.
It gives you the facts, what happens, what you could get if you have it, or what if you don't have it.
And we get a question from Leonardo, and it's something that I saw when I thought about when I saw your presentation. To what extent is the flexibilization of demand included? Because you showed all the graphs, but that changes all the time, I presume. I mean, summer and winter is different. How does that work?
So the basic modeling of the demand is what you saw in the graph. Is it can change, but maybe it's fixed. But yes, we include demand response. There are different ways. There is sector coupling, so through electrification, for example, of hydrogen, then you have electrolyzers that they react to prices. So that is a type of demand response. You can also model, for example, heating in houses, electric vehicles, heating, for example, they can move part of the demand 2 hours, reacting to prices. Electric vehicles, they can have a smart charging where it is cheap. And all that is taken into account. Of course, a huge amount of demand response. They also move prices, but it all plays to obtain an equilibrium that is good for the system. But yes, we include demand response.
Yeah, because it all depends on each other.
Yes.
And now it becomes more and more hip that you have a battery at home that is smart, and your car is smart, and everything becomes smart. And your model even needs to become more smart. A question from Annemieke. Is this model only existing for existing equipment, or how you do you also take into account the expanding of the network? I mean, I can imagine that also not only the origin of the energy will change, but also the network will change. a new capacity will be brought in or whatever, extra lines will be brought in.
Yeah. So the model takes into account both cases. So we start with the current capacity of the network. We also know, because the system operators also publish what is the evolution of the network. There are already some plans for the next 10, 20 years, what will happen. So we include that. And we also can check what are the optimal investments needed to better accommodate renewables. Or maybe it's not needed, because if you include the storage, that can help with congestion. But yes, we include the evolution and also can support with where else is needed.
I had another quite interesting question from Leonard Hohaus, because it's how do the predictions compare to common sense intuition? Are the policies that the work surprisingly well or are surprisingly counterproductive? I mean, isn't there also sort of logic in your models? Is the outcome surprising? Is it something that you think, I never expected this?
So many cases, I think the goal is here cheap options.
Yeah.
So if you need more generation, and you see big differences in the cost of the generators, then it's not so surprising that first the cheap generators are included. But surprise, have you seen surprises?
Yes, I think maybe one example that people can already see is that I think many are familiar that there are negative prices, at least in a market. Even for me, it is weird. Suppose that you go to a bakery and today we pay you to get bread.
Yeah.
So basically that is happening. So then you wonder why do I get paid for that? So what happens is when you include all those constraints in the system, sometimes there are some generators that they are willing to pay you in order that they are not shut down for 1 hour and start up again, because that starting up costs more money for them. So that is one reason, for example, of the negative prices. Or congestion in the network, that you need another unit that is very expensive just to try to alleviate the congestion. That can also lead to negative prices. So those are sometimes examples that you see that you learn more from the models than
It explains why there's...
And sometimes you try to force, oh no, I don't want to see the negative price, but then you make the operation more expensive. So it's better to leave it.
There was a question from Anke, I think. Where do you get your predictions data from for the different solutions? Where did you get your data from? Is it all from practical, or is some also being calculated?
Some of it comes from the European network operators. So they built a data set to support decisions, and so that's the NSOE, and that's public, so everyone can use that. So part of that is used from there. Are we using currently other sources?
Yeah, there are many public sources, but there are also, it is difficult when we talk about 2050 about the exact data. So many times we also create scenarios. So we make an educated guess, and there are some institutes like CBS that give projections, and then we also use that data.
Yeah, I can imagine, and I can also imagine where the question comes from, because I can imagine that if all this data is there, why do you need approximation? But I see it, because otherwise there's no time to calculate all these. And I'm always every time I come across this in Delft, where I see that actually computing time is a scarcity, and you need these algorithms to come up with the answer solution in time. It was very well showed in your presentation. I think it was nice.
Yeah, and especially as Gemán said, the data we sometimes need to generate it ourselves. So a decision maker wants to play around with different scenarios. And so maybe there's more sun in the future, or maybe solar panels become more efficient, or maybe, and for each of those maybes, you need to supply the model with a slightly different data set.
Yeah.
The cost, maybe different costs for, maybe some things become very cheap or very expensive, and then you want to play around, because if you change the input to the model, you also get different decisions in the end. Or in many cases you get different decisions.
Yeah, because that's a question of Mike. So what are the dials that a policymaker can turn, and what are the things that the policymakers can do to use your model?
Yeah. So for some policy decisions, potential policy decisions, the model can compute the consequences. So, for example, putting a huge tax on certain types of generated energy, well, it will increase the cost of generating that energy, and that will lead to a different outcome where that will be, the use of those generators will be reduced. So I'm thinking of coal, for example. You could tax that. So that's an example of a policy measure that we can directly translate into input data for this model. Mm-hmm. And then you get already to see some of that. But there are also policy decisions that we currently cannot do much about. So I think an important challenge for basically the energy transition is that the big investors here, the energy companies, they run into a lot of risk. They don't. So if you put billions in a wind park, you are not certain that you will get those billions back. Hopefully you get it back tenfold, but you don't know. You may lose actually. Yeah. And that risk, that is currently the model not capable of dealing with. Yes. Some representation of the uncertainty in all the demand plots in the input, but we have no explicit reasoning about risk. And that's actually very important. So that is something that we are working on in our next project. It's called Modes, together with a large consortium. But one of the challenges there is to think about these future energy markets, and then reasoning about the risk of the main actors in this domain is an important thing that we need to work on in our model.
Because I imagine taxation is one thing, but also deregulating where you can build a wind park is something that has a risk, or I think it's quite difficult to take it all into account. Interesting, because that's we get some questions about that as well. To come up with also a question for you, Gemán. And to go back to the because it's we've received quite a number of questions about nuclear energy. Your model, isn't it actually? Can you imagine a future without nuclear energy? If you study your own model,
you can. That is something that actually those are the scenarios that usually we check. What happens if you don't have nuclear energy? Then you will need other alternatives, and can be gas with CCS, for example, carbon capture. But you need some kind of backup to the renewables, especially in the times where there are not that much renewables. A cold winter that is not that windy. So cold means high heat demand, not wind, and not solar energy. So those moments is where that backup generation is usually needed. Nuclear can help a lot, but if you don't have nuclear, then you need other sources.
But it's here. I've been here in Delft now for 3 years, or almost 4, and I feel that there's a lot of sympathy for the nuclear energy type. I think among our alumni as well, they're always very interested in nuclear energy. So of course we have in Delft the Reactor Institute. So
for sure, nuclear. Okay, I know there is some debate about the waste and all that, but just from the technical and operational point of view for the energy systems, is a really good alternative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There are other issues, and then people need to decide, or politicians, if they want or not. But just from the technical point of view and operational of the system, is a great alternative. No pollution and firm capacity that you can trust, and it's already proven, and it's really good and economical.
Yeah, I had another scientist here on the same chair, and she was investing the molten salt solutions, and that was, and she was extremely enthusiastic about the opportunities. But one more question from the audience, from Theodora, and especially her second question, I think, is interesting. Is there any indication from the Tulipa, from the conclusions from your model, about the time window for policy implementation? Do you think we need to act now, or is it? How do you see that?
So the model can provide decisions also for when to do investments.
Yeah.
But the model itself does not have a policy implementation in there. So you would need to study the outcome of our model to see, okay, we need significantly more investments according to the cheapest solution for our energy transition, significantly more investments in wind parks, at sea, but the government has opened only one area, and nobody is making good bids. Then you can say, oh yeah, there is some information that comes out of our model that gives a direction for the policy.
Yeah. Well,
but maybe to complement a little bit,
yeah.
Yes, actually, we are almost late for the energy transition. Just the government, they released not that long ago a study saying that there is a need of 200 billion euros of investment in network capacity just by 2040, just to connect the extra renewables and the extra electrification. TENEC reacted to that saying, whoa, even if the money is there, it's difficult just to open up all the streets and start putting cables everywhere. And a model like Tulipa can help in, maybe that is not the best solution. Of course, maybe some reinforcement is needed, but demand response, storage, that can also help not to make just investments and more cables and more cables. That is not usually the optimal solution. So if we want a soon energy transition, and soon is 2050 already, we need to take soon decisions, optimal decisions.
And to come back to what we're here for, that I think is so, that's why it's so important that we as a university fund can fund your project and come up with this interface so that policymakers understand what's happening and realize that they should take action and get the money and build these extra wind parks, maybe a nuclear facility somewhere. But I think it's wonderful that you both were here. You made me a little bit more enthusiastic about math again, and I think it's really you made a really good point why it's so important that what you're doing. I wish you a lot of success, and I hope that the viewers at home are also happy to be watching this, and are convinced now to help you and make a donation. If you want to make a donation, small or large, doesn't matter. Use the QR code you can see on your screen, or you can just call us if you need help. It was really nice having these Tech Talks this year. I hope to see you next year again. And remember, you're all part of Theodore for Life, and you're all part of this huge community. And I hope that you make use of this community. And one of the easiest ways is to give a little donation to your project. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. Thank you and good luck.
Oh, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks also to the audience. I'd like to point out that you can find Tulipa if you search for Tulipa energy model. That's also one of the questions. I think it's good to...
If you have more questions...
Yes. It's an open source model, more need for funding because we built this for society so everybody can use it and everybody can take advantage of it.
Great. Thank you. Well done and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.